everyone. Welcome back to the CCO Follow podcast.
Yay!
We have taken a bit of a break. My name is Arthur D'Alessandro. I'm joined here with Travis Sinks, and today we have Hunter Grandorf on. We have been really excited about this month, not only because we've been out for a time, 2 months.
Yeah, going to Europe and Australia.
Yeah, all that.
Seeing all the places.
We're excited because we are going to start covering this topic of singleness. So on Wednesday of this week, if you're watching this as it's coming out, Travis gave a teaching on singleness and the topic of singleness and how the church and the community is to respond or is to experience singleness. And it's one of those topics I think gets overlooked often. Specifically just because, if you look at history of the church, a lot of people are married. Even in our culture, a lot of people
they're very explicitly single, like nuns and monks.
Yeah.
It's like either you're that or you're married.
Exactly. And so we want to cover singleness because it is important. And, we read in the Bible, oftentimes it's actually seen as better than being married because you can focus 100% on Christ. And so we want to kind of go through and look at different people's experiences and stories and views. And so today we have Hunter on. Hunter is single. So,
yes, I am.
So we're, it's
not an advertisement.
Just putting that
it's just
out
something
there.
to notice.
Hunter's single, and I'm curious. As we kind of get started, what has been your experience being single? What is your view? Have you even thought about it? What's your take on this?
I haven't given it like a whole lot of thought, like specifically like thinking about me being single. It's just kind of a state of being at this point.
Yeah, fish and water.
Yeah.
And so haven't really dated much. I had like the same girlfriend all through high school, but have been basically just single all since then. I was very appreciative in high school of having the same girlfriend. We were together for about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
But it was really nice because we didn't have to deal with any of the other dating drama, whatever, going all through high school. Like, they're together, they're a couple. We don't even have to acknowledge them anymore or have any other drama related to that. So that was very appreciative. And after that, we ended up being taken in different directions by God. And so it was very mutual, going our separate ways. Very, very appreciative and thankful to God for that, because I've heard a lot of stories where it's not that case.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciate that. But being single since then, it's really given me a lot of opportunities to just be available and do when an opportunity arises, and I'm able to just go on that. I remember one specific opportunity for when being single is a few years ago. I had a friend who ended up getting pretty sick, like right a few days before Christmas. But there was a game night that was going on with she had been up north for several years up in Sultan, and her group of friends up there were having a game night, but she was too sick to drive but still wanted to, like, well enough to participate but couldn't get up there on her own. So her mom ended up calling me like that day. It was a Friday, I think it was the 22nd of December, and just saying like, hey, would you be willing to drive Justine up there? Like, you guys, it's all worked out. You'd be able to spend the night up there, but you guys just, like, can you drive her up there? And I'm like, well, I guess I'll check with my family real quick and say, like, are we doing anything next couple of days? Like, no. I'm like, okay. So I finished up work, got home, packed up a few things, got in the car, drove over, picked up her. She's all drugged up on cold medicine. She passes out in the seat, and I started driving up there. So it was really great to be able to go up there and spend the time. And since we were both single, didn't really have any other obligations, that we were able to just take that opportunity to spend time with one another and fellowship. And then was able to see her church that she'd been working on up there for the next day. And then we were going to pick up something for my dad off of Craigslist. And when I copied the address over, it had somehow put it in completely wrong.
Oh.
And we didn't find that out until we ended up in Roy.
Oh, no.
Wow.
So we're like, well, we're definitely not going to make it and find anything. And we were going to a different friend's Christmas Adam party that evening. It's like, well, we have to go past their house to get back to my house anyways. Like, well, let's just stop and get some food, and then we'll just go to the party from there.
Yeah.
And so it was a great time, a trip that I'll be able to remember for the rest of my life. And we never would have had the opportunity if we had other people that we had other responsibilities to.
Sure.
We can just get up and go.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think as we talk about singleness, it's going to get brought up is just the freedom associated with it to go and be the church.
Yeah.
Travis, what is your take on this whole singleness? Why are we even going through this month?
Well, I mean, I think it comes down to things that you don't consider, you oftentimes don't steward well. And a lot of times people consider singleness to be just like something you pass through. It's not a place you stop at. It's not a place you really focus on. It's not a season of life that, during that season of life, well, it's because you're trying to find your spouse and your first job. And it's like, that's what you're doing. And it's like, no, like this is a whole season of some people's lives, sometimes their entire lives. And if you don't pause and consider the implications of it, you're not going to steward it well. I mean, we have entire conferences, not just us, but like most churches and most, there's books written all about it of just like how to do your marriage well, and
marriage
how to
conferences.
Yeah. And how to parent well, and how like these seasons of life. But if we're not that we should necessarily take the same amount of time to talk about singleness, but if we're not taking any time to talk about singleness, how do we expect to steward that time well? And the reality is not just people who are single now and one day married, but even if you're married, chances are you will be single again.
Yeah.
Either because of divorce or death, that you will experience being single probably again in your life.
Yeah. And everybody starts out single.
Yeah.
And our call isn't, once we get married, then we're fulfilling our calling.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
A lot of people act like life begins then. And
exactly.
It's like, then you missed out on a lot of life.
And so, this whole month, I'm excited because it really is. This isn't just, this month isn't just for the single people.
Yeah.
It's this, in my honest opinion, it's almost more so for everybody who calls themselves a Christian in this community, in this church. I really am kind of talking about our church specifically and our church community. How can we live according to Scripture and according to what Christ has called us to live, and care about the singles, care about the people who maybe are single for a long time because they we're going to talk with Pat this month of just her husband passed away, and now she has this life. And so it's going to be a fun topic, I think, to cover, but I just hope that we can come together at the end of this and realize, there's a lot to be done here, and there's a lot to be heard here.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done by people who are single. There's a lot to be done by those who are, in relationship and community, those who are single.
Yeah.
And they both have responsibilities.
So that's good little key point here. In your experience, what has your experience been with the church in this community in regards to singleness? You mentioned that you were able to be free and do more things. What does that look like for you?
For me, so I'm really involved in the theater and drama program here, and me being single was giving me a lot of opportunity for just being available, and I've been a part of basically every drama related thing here in the last 10 years. There's been like maybe one or two things that I haven't been all that involved in, but since I have the time, I'm just able to be here a lot. And at this point, I'm here multiple times a week of different opportunity, different groups that I'm a part of. And I'm just able to be here early, stay late because I don't have those responsibilities at home. And I'm able to devote a lot more energy towards those things. I don't have the home life that I need to set aside that those energies for. And so it's, yeah.
Do you find it difficult to, keep up your own personal devotion to Jesus and like prayer time and like Bible time and stuff like that, because it's so easy. I mean, you get just called on by a lot of stuff because, when you have more free time, it's kind of like the people who have free time suddenly don't have it because there's like, everyone knows, oh, that person's usually available. Ask them. I mean, you came and helped, on my deck and stuff like that. You've helped a lot of stuff at the church. Like you're one of the people I know a lot of people go to by default because you've shown yourself to be faithful and available.
Yeah.
So has that led to maybe difficulty in other areas where you have free time, but it doesn't mean you have all the time?
Certainly. And specifically that point is something I've started saying is I find myself busy because I'm always available.
Yeah.
Which figure that one out.
Yep.
I'm always doing something. And yes, it definitely does affect my devotions and spending time God specifically, because I'm doing all these other things. Then by the time I get back home to do whatever, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to veg out and do nothing. So I'm definitely susceptible to that. And it is something that comes into effect when I'm doing so many other things because I'm available.
Yeah.
And that is one of the downsides of being single is you don't have that other person or other
calling
people
you out.
Yeah. Being right there with you.
Yeah.
You can't sound bad, but you can't escape from them.
Yeah.
And they
totally.
will be there and they will notice and
Yeah.
they will call you out on that. And so that is a risk and a pitfall of being single. And that's something that other people check up on your single friends on that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Because-
You have to more proactively find that accountability and that kind of calling out person.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are some other things that you've found to be difficult in regards to singleness?
Loneliness is a big one because you don't have that person there all the time. And especially if you're more extroverted like I am, I like being around people. And so, but oftentimes there are times where all the couples and other things, they're doing their own things and they have their own lives. And so you get a little forgotten about and they just don't have time for you. So you can have that loneliness. That's a big one that I definitely struggle with.
So it seems like it's easy, as a single person, it seems like it's easy to help and serve and get involved with a lot of different things, but there's a temptation or just something that just practically happens, but a lack of fellowship, like genuine fellowship, being with one another.
The closer, deeper relationships.
Yeah. How do you address that in your life? Have you found a healthy way to do that?
Little bits here and there. Definitely the young adults group here has been very helpful the last few years. It's become a really good group and we're definitely getting closer to one another. And then definitely in the theater ministry that I'm close with a lot of them and a fair amount of them are married. So I do get to see the different interactions and different wisdom that I can gain from them. And then some of them are single, and so that we can, more of the load can be put on us of doing those things outside of family commitments. And then also recognizing the roles that we play now, and then the roles that we see our married and coupled friends, to file that away for potentially when we get to that point where we're in that position.
Yeah.
And so to remember what it was like before and to see what it looks like from the outside, so to help find that balance when we actually get to that point, if that is what God calls us to.
I think back to when I was single. I personally don't think that it's interesting, like the story of like my wife and I and how we met and just our relationship and how it went. I I didn't get married as young as you did, but it still felt like I married young because it was like basically right after college.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have a ton of adult time to be single. And I think that kind of was a disservice to me in some way. Obviously, God uses all things, and it's, I wouldn't change anything about my experience, but I definitely feel like I didn't gain a lot of that good wisdom from others. I wasn't surrounded by people who were married. I was just surrounded by other single people. And in college, especially, it's not the healthiest. They're not healthy singles. And so I definitely had to, it was tough for my wife and I to experience, even just have a healthy relationship because of that. And, that's part of our story. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in future episodes. But Travis, I'm curious for you, being someone who did marry so young, what are some things that, like, when you think about singleness, do you think about things that maybe you missed or you wish you had done differently, or that you identify now and are trying to do differently?
I don't feel like I missed. I mean, I certainly don't feel like I missed anything. Like, I'm bummed I got married so young. I don't think that at all. I think our marriage is a little bit different than I think a lot of people's marriage story, because although we were together, so you didn't have like the loneliest aspect of singleness, the free time and the flexibility and stuff like that, because we served in such compatible areas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Our first, 3-4 years of marriage was all about that. We wrapped our jobs and our lives around, serving in ministry and serving people we knew. And so although we didn't get, some of the aspects of singleness, we didn't experience some of the drawbacks that maybe you'd call it,
sure,
of marriage, until maybe we started having kids. And that's when it started impacting, like, we're not staying out as late when there's this opportunity. We're not able to just jump and do this thing at last minute notice sometimes. Even after our first kid, it was maybe a year or two after that when it really hit. But even when we had our first kid, that's when it really started to, like, slow down and force us to, like, we can't just jump at every single thing all the time and give all of our time. Up until that time, our marriage pretty much was almost like, in some way, it sounds bad, but in some ways, like two single people, like, doing everything together.
Yeah.
Where we just would drop everything all the time and just do stuff. But so and I certainly don't think I missed out on all of the whole, like, dating scene. I'm glad I was able to escape that. Because that's just a train wreck.
Well, I want to kind of
only gotten worse.
dive deeper into that. Is like how, I have, and it's so hypocritical for me to say this because I'm married and, I don't have to worry about this now. But, like, looking back, I think there was a lot of temptation in me to, like, I want to get married. I want to find a wife, and I was really searching for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pitfall to fall into. And I don't know how you feel about this. I'm curious to kind of see your perspective, but why, why is searching for that a pitfall? At least for me, is like when more of my energy was spent, hoping, wishing, and searching for, a partner, I was missing opportunities of just resting in the Lord, of doing the things that the Lord has called me to do in that moment, in that season of my life. And I think it's a temptation. It almost becomes an idol in itself, of, like, trying to find a relationship or bouncing from a relationship to relationship to relationship. So I'm curious for you, Hunter, being single now, what's the process look like for you? Are you dating? Are you trying to look for dating? I'm just curious what your perspective is on that, and, like, where God fits in this whole puzzle.
Yes, it definitely can be an idol, and definitely I've had that be an idol in different seasons of it being a larger one than other times where it's much more suppressed. And then going a much better road, and other times it flares up and like, I really want this. I'm only focusing on this. The seeking after like dating and going from one person to another, that I have never really done. I've never really been interested in that. And different friends or different people I've watched over the years, and like, I want no part of that.
Yeah.
But I do always, and definitely more in the last few years, of being aware and watching for potential, but definitely trying, not really succeeding, but definitely trying to, you're running the race, and if you see someone that comes alongside you and you run the race together, is kind of what I strive and hope for these days. Definitely don't do it all the time, but I definitely, at least in the back of my head says it's right, and my heart says it's right. Getting those two to be on the same wavelength at the same time, that's hard.
Yeah.
But definitely something I strive to do and it's definitely something, especially with the aspect of two single people doing all the same things. You don't want to fall into the pitfall of that, but the aspects of that, of doing the same or complementary ministries together, is definitely something I really want.
Yeah.
Especially since I am really involved in drama and a lot of things here. I would really want someone that would complement that. And whether they do it with me or super supportive of me, like Tad and Kay.
Yeah.
Chad is super involved here and does a lot with the ministry. Like, Kay doesn't really do anything with that, but it's very supportive. And I've definitely noticed that over the years. And like, if I don't have someone that is there right there beside me, I want someone like Kay. And I want people like myself at that point, where they will recognize the sacrifices that she does for Tad, and to help Tad and do everything I can to build up Kay and help her with the fact that Tad's gone a lot with a lot of the other things.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really healthy way to look at it, for sure.
Yeah.
Travis, what is your thought on the way we've addressed singleness as a church culture in the past? Like, because I've known we've had conversations where this is a topic that you're really passionate about covering. Why is that? What are some things that you think we've maybe not done well, and how can we address them going forward?
Well, in general, the capital C church really doesn't address singleness pretty much at all. And so that's not good. But when it is addressed, it's usually addressed as like biding your time. Like, oh, okay, well, what are you going to do until you find that person? Or it's all about making yourself right for that person. And it's like, it's although you're not, you're single and you're not married, it's as if you're still supposed to orient your whole life to this idea of marriage, which scripture makes very clear. You may not get married. Like, you just might not.
Yeah.
It might not be God's will for you, what have you. So to orient your whole life around that, I think is just really inappropriate. It just doesn't make sense. Paul even says that essentially, like, if you are okay not being married, it's better for you. And he says multiple reasons why. But so I think we do a disservice when we basically treat singleness as like just a passing through, or a bide your time, or prepare yourself for marriage, and that's all singleness is for. Instead of being like, well, for a long time, people viewed singleness as like, this is the path you take if you really want to get close to God. Now that's, I think, has its own air.
Extreme,
yeah. It has its own air with it, but it certainly is so far different than what we treat it now as like just a biding time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we treat singleness as the selfish option, where it's like you just want to be single because you just don't want people in your life and stuff like that. Sometimes we treat, we put all these different labels on it, and most of them not correct, and most of them not encouraging to be like, well, how do you actually do it well?
Yeah.
So I think encouraging someone to do it well would be like, oh, okay, well, if you don't want to be single, or if you don't want to be married, well, how is God guiding you to be more sanctified? How are you putting community in your life to be part of the church and to have accountability and have relationships and have all these, things? And if you don't want to be single your whole life, if you want to be married, okay, so how are you spending today as if it's still the last day of your life?
Exactly.
And Jesus says, how many of you can add through worry 1 cubit to his stature? Like, how many of you can get married purely by worrying about it? And it's like, none. Like, let's live today following God and let tomorrow take care of itself.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity, and just experience it's one of those things, like, we all have those things of like, hey God, here's my desire.
Mm-hmm.
I can either try to pursue that desire, or I'm going to pursue you and trust whatever happens, like, it's going to be better than what I could even desire. And I think that is one of those perfect examples. And that's why I loved what you said, is just, that's where your head and your heart is like, I'm not looking, I'm not searching for it. If I'm running my race and I see someone come along with me, okay, that's great, because I desire that closeness, right?
Yeah, which is a good thing. The Bible says desiring a wife is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. And I love that it's you're at that place, because I think for myself back in the day, and I think for so many, it's really easy to get caught up in, like, even just what our societal culture is regarding singleness versus, dating or marriage or whatever that is. It's almost like you look at somebody who, oh, you're 30 something years old and you don't have anybody, and it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're going after Christ. Whether you're married,
God has not put that person in front of you.
Exactly.
We had, when we were just graduating high school, literally probably 6-8 months before we got married, and we got married very young. Sorry, that's graduating college, not high school. There was probably 8 couples that were all young adults in their super late 20s or early 30s that all got married within like 2 years of us. And it was just like, that's when God had for them to get married. And all of them are very, happily married now and, doing great. And it's like, that was God's timing. He wanted them to be single during that season of their life, and he wanted to be married at that season of their life. But there's no guarantee which one it's going to be. And, it's kind of like Paul, where he's like, I've learned the secret to be content, whether I'm rich or whether I'm poor. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we do disservice to people who are single, and really anyone, because if we're teaching it to people when they're single, that means everyone at some point is hearing this message essentially of don't be content. Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, like, that's not right.
It's just totally wrong.
Yeah.
So kind of going a little bit further now, for those who aren't single, how can we or they or even just church community in general help support singleness in a healthy way, of not necessarily, doing, like, completely avoiding it and not even discussing it, and not falling into the traps of, oh, well, when you get married, or when this happens or when that happens. How can we just gather together as a community and support singleness? Open-ended question for either of you.
Well, I know one of the things I guess I'll give 2 things since they're kind of tied together, is when we started our home group, we told Tom we specifically wanted a couple single people in our home group. Given that we have kids, it's really easy for, Tom, the person trying to coordinate who goes where,
to just put more kids in.
Yeah,
more
all
families.
the families with kids. And we were like, hey, we're fine getting more families with kids, but we want at least 1 or 2 single people in our home group. Because we think that's really lacking for a lot of people. It's really easy for people who are single to not join a home group because everyone else is coming usually with someone. I'd say vast majority of home groups have married couples, not single people. So that was one thing we did, is we specifically wanted to pursue single people in our home group because we knew we'd get by default other ones. And then same thing when we try to just host like friends coming over, we try to make sure that we don't just invite couples. That's something we'll talk about, next week on the podcast. But, that was something that wasn't really on my radar. We've gone through multiple seasons in our marriage of different friend groups, and sometimes we've had friend groups that are 90% all single people. And so it was really easy to have just single people over because that was most of our friends. But then when you have when the scales are tipped and you have more married couples in your friend groups, it's really easy to neglect the single people. And so making sure that we're not neglecting either group and just trying to be proactive when we're inviting people of like, oh, who are we inviting, and that.
Yeah. Are you in a home group? Just curious.
I am not currently in a home group. I've been in different ones over the past. Right now, it's definitely has to do with being single, but also the sheer, like, I'm running out of time.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, I encourage you, get involved in a home group. They're great. Anything else to say in regards to single? I don't know if you have anything that you feel like, I really want this to be known.
I was thinking of providing for those opportunities of running alongside. We should definitely focus on that. Like, for those of us that will be single our whole lives, it gives good to devote our times to those ministries and those opportunities. But then for the people that will get married, that provides opportunities to meet one another. And that's definitely something that married couples, if they can definitely support those things and bring about opportunities for people to meet one another, and whether that ends up leading to a marriage or just leads to a better community, there's no downsides to this if we really focus on providing opportunities for people to meet and do things, and ministry with one another is definitely something we should focus on.
Yeah, it's a win-win. I love that. You can't lose.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Hunter. And thank you so much for joining us today, watching and listening. We're excited to be back.
Yeah.
I will say I've been getting the itch, and really excited to be back. In regards to this, it's not like a new season. We took a little bit of a break, but it's not like it's a different podcast. It's the same podcast.
There's a lot of new things.
We're going after the same things, but exactly, there's a lot of new things, and
there's new backdrop. You never mentioned it.
I didn't want to mention the backdrop because if you're watching, you can see.
There's not a new backdrop.
But yeah, there's some changes physically, but even more than that, in following Jesus together, which this whole podcast and this whole follow resource page is all about, is we're trying to follow Christ, and we want to help people join together. We want to do it as a community. And part of that is listening and getting feedback from the community, and answering maybe some questions that the community has. And so in regards to that, Travis and I created it was really Travis, but we created I don't know if you can explain it. It's just a form you can fill out, where you can fill out questions, and we encourage you at the end of every month, right? Yeah. At the end of every month, towards our last kind of podcast episode for whatever topic we've been covering, we're going to gather all of those questions that you and all of us, the community, has provided and asked. And I think it's going to be a great way to, because Travis and we're kind of in a bubble, honestly, where we work at a church and we're here, we spend every day with each other. And so we don't necessarily have great questions all the time. And so listening to you guys ask your questions of different topics.
Yeah, I have a single friend and I'm not sure how to, or I recently got married and my single friend is, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
What kind of hair gel does Arthur use?
You could even ask that. You might not get an answer, but yeah, we wanted to open that up to you guys. And it's something that we've been thinking about for a long time. So if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever Apple is, you can leave comments and in the comment section, ask questions. And if you want to be more anonymous, or if you're watching on our website, we're going to have that form, which you can answer anonymously on the follow resource page. I don't know. You can explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, we might go back. Certain topics we'll probably touch again, but it might be a couple of years. And we just want to make sure that we're not ending, the month's topic with people feeling like, oh, I really wonder what, the the Bible says about this
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it. And maybe we just didn't think to touch on that. So we just want to make sure that we're covering things like that. But it's at calvaryoli.com/follow podcast. Just one word, no space, follow podcast. And that's where you can click a button. You can fill out a form. You can make it anonymous or not.
Yep.
And yeah.
We'd love to answer as many questions as we can. If we get like 1,000 questions, we're probably not going to answer all of them, but we'll do our best to kind of formulate them in, try to find different themes that we can, answer. But please get involved. If you're watching and listening, this is your opportunity to get involved and be a part of this on an even greater scale. So with that said, thank you again so much for joining us today, watching and listening, and we look forward to the rest of this month and to the next episode. Hunter, thank you again for being on, and as always, God bless.